The Jesuits decided that he was not qualified, and God decided that he was.
That year, we went down to the Huron country to minister to the Christians among them. We were captured by Iroquois. Rene made the sign of the cross over an infant boy.
C'est là la raison pour laquelle, vraisemblablement, il a été assassiné.
Seeing it for the first time, Jacques Cartier said of it that it was the land God gave to Cain.
Sanguis martyrum semen Christian.
The blood of martyrs is the seed of Christians. Dieppe, a French seaport on the Normandy coast. Today, a stopping-off place for tourists from across the English Channel, Dieppe was once the premier seaport of the Kingdom of France. Place is well known to the voyagers of long ago, the 12th century Cathedral Saint-Jacques, where they bowed in prayer for safe passage. The 15th century Château de Dieppe, whose cannons saluted their departure. The last glimpse of the old world seen by those bound for the new, Normandy's famous white cliffs. Those who led them, Jacques Cartier, who sailed from nearby Saint-Malo and brought Native Americans from his first expedition back to France. Samuel de Champlain, who explored New France and set up the first government over lands claimed for the king, making friends and enemies among the inhabitants. And it was also from here that France sent the first large numbers of men and women to bring the faith to these new possessions. Inside the Cathedral Saint-Jacques, scenes in stained glass from that fearful enterprise. Spearheading the effort were Catholic missionaries, Ursuline and Augustine sisters, and priests and brothers of the Order of the Society of Jesus, known today throughout the world as the Jesuits. The Jesuits were a young order then, in existence less than 100 years, when these determined men took their faith into the unknown. Between 1642 and 1649, 8 Jesuit missionaries would be killed in the Canadian wilderness. Gupil, Jogues, Lallemand, Chabanel, Garnier, Lalande, Daniel de Brebeuf. One by one, they left this place, a place none of them ever saw again. Father William Breau is a member of the California province of the Society of Jesus. An artist and author, he lives with a Jesuit community in Sacramento, California. The community, and the school attached to it, are dedicated to the French martyrs of North America.
I remember as a young seminarian reading the lives of Jogues and de Brebeuf and Gupil and wondering how they could take such punishment and torture. And why? I was stunned. Why?
Philippe L'Écrivain is a French Jesuit who has devoted his life to the study of the Jesuit missions.
Ils sont tout donnés à Dieu, c'est certain.
They gave themselves entirely to God. They followed Christ in the way of St. Ignatius, followed Christ right up to the acceptance, if necessary, of being killed for him. This is what we call the martyr's vow.
C'est ce qu'on appelle le vœu du martyr.
One of these martyrs intrigued Breau more than the others, Rene Gupil. Gupil, the first of the missionaries killed in the New World. He had come to the missions not as a priest, but as a lay volunteer, a donné, working in his trade as a surgeon. Gupil finally took the vows of the order while in the hands of the Iroquois, with death hanging over him. And he did so, even though the order had originally turned him away.
When Gupil entered the society in Paris in 1639, he could read, he could write, which was very unusual at that time. In addition to that, he was a surgeon. You'd think that somebody like that would be accepted by the society, but he was told to leave in 2 months because he had problems hearing. That never shows up again in his life. The Jesuits decided he wasn't qualified, and God decided that he was.
Father Brault's interest in Gupil and the French martyrs of North America is sharpened by personal history. Descended from French Canadians who intermarried with Native Americans, could he himself be a distant relative of those who had killed Rene Gupil, Isaac Jogues, or their fellow missionaries? To learn about this and much more, this Jesuit went off in search of a Jesuit brother.
December.
Brault soon discovered that the search for Rene Gupil could not be accomplished by archival research alone. Gupil had not left a diary or even a single letter, not one shred of evidence of his factual history. There was scant mention of him in the Jesuit Relations, written reports of missionary activities sent back to France by Jesuits in the New World. Gupil was, as Brault called him in a book he wrote about him, a ghost.
Even a ghost leaves tracks.
But even a ghost leaves tracks.
There are footprints. The past isn't just wiped out. Something of the past stays with the present moment. So when I go someplace or look for something that's happened, I look for that spirit, you might call it, that persists in this present moment.
The persistence of the past. To apprehend the significance today of Rene Gupil and the French martyrs of North America, Brault decided he must walk in their footsteps. Encouraged by the minister of his community, Jesuit Brother Justin de Chance, in 1992 he set off on a pilgrimage that would take him over 12,000 miles to countries on 2 continents. He talked with those who lived where Gupil had lived, making sketches of people and places along the way, as if the physical act of passing these scenes through his fingertips would make them concrete, would help sharpen the focus on his elusive quarry. And so, what began as a research project into the life of Rene Gupil, a man lost in history, took on an added character, the character of the man searching for him. This church, the Église Saint-Martin-du-Bois in France's Loire Valley, was the parish church of Rene Gupil. Originally constructed in the 14th century, only the steeple remains from the original structure. As local historian Jean Gabiard explains, the church was destroyed during the French Revolution, then rebuilt some 70 years later. Everything was torn down except the steeple, which was conserved as a cost-saving measure. The church's patron saint, Martin of Tours, was restored in a magnificent scene in stained glass on the church's south-facing transept. In a story that would have fired the imaginations of young village boys like Rene, when Martin was a Roman soldier in what was then ancient Gaul, he is said to have happened upon a scantily dressed beggar. He impulsively cut his own military cloak in half and shared it with the man. That night he dreamed of Jesus wearing the half-cloak he had given away, saying, "Here is Martin, the Roman soldier, who has clad me." Martin immediately took the sacrament of baptism. From then on he was, in his own words, a soldier for Christ. Today is Sunday, but the Église Saint-Martin-du-Bois is empty. With France's shortage of priests and shrinking numbers of faithful, Masses are offered in many remote French villages only one Sunday each month, a far cry from the 17th century, when Catholic France called herself the eldest daughter of the Church. In those days, l'Église du village, the village church, wasn't just busy on Sunday. The hub of the community, it was the first and last stops on the road of life, and the place to celebrate everything along the way. As Saint-Martin's mayor André Belliard and Jean Gabillard explain, the church was vital. For the people of the village, it was a place to get close to one another, a place of exchange, and a place of welcome. In one history of the commune, the author writes about a structure that was put up in front of the church, a sort of stage. And every Sunday after Mass, the townspeople exchanged goods there. The town crier came and rang a bell, announcing the news of the village. Something that might be on his list of announcements, a public penance. According to Jean Gabillard, the same local historian tells of a sacristan who was overheard using a swear word in the church. Dispensing with the privacy of the confessional, the curé held a torch over the prostrate offender and heard his confession before the full congregation. A trip up the bell tower of l'Église Saint-Martin. No doubt young Rene Gupil raced up this ancient stonework on his way to ring the bells of the church. It turns out that while the church served the spiritual and social needs of the community, this tower served the people in still another way, by helping ensure their physical survival. This steeple dates from the 14th century. It served to warn people during the 100 Years' War, whenever the English were approaching. They would build a signal fire up here to let people know it was time to rally together to defend the town. The fact that this village was the birthplace of Rene Gupil only came to light shortly before Father Bro's visit here in 1992. Its baptismal font, which had been removed to a nearby park, was restored here. It was into this basin on the 15th of May, 1608, that the son of Hippolyte Gupil and Luce Provost was dipped 3 times, while the parish priest consecrated the child to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Following the ceremony, Renes Baptism was recorded into this leather-bound book, now kept by Mayor Belliard in the town hall. After the baptism, the family returned here. This is La Grande Rancherie, in Loire Valley regional parlance, the large farm. This is the house where Rene Gupil was born and grew to manhood. Father Bro came here looking for clues about Rene's early life. Although he found little then, Jean Gabillard discovers something now missed on that earlier investigation. You clearly see at the corner of the building a reinforced column, which could have supported a watchtower. Every manor or chateau of this era had a tower to keep watch over the surrounding area. Did young Rene play in that tower? If so, it was a game that might turn deadly serious at any moment. During his youth, bands of brigands roamed the French countryside. One infamous ringleader was captured by agents of the king and strapped to a giant wheel. While a priest exhorted him to repent, le bourreau, the executioner, began to break the bones of the condemned man, one by one with an iron bar.
In 17th century France, torture was an acceptable way of dealing with human failure. The people were used to things that we are not. The pest, hangings, shootings, sickness, death was surrounding them always. You had to be pretty strong in order to resist all of that. And I think most people looked at life as though death were right around the corner. So it was an acceptable part of life.
But the news reaching La Grande Rancherie was not all terror and violence. There was also celebration, hope, and inspiration. 2 events took place in 1622, when Rene was at the impressionable age of 14, that may well have turned him toward the missionary field. In that year, a Native American was brought back from New France and baptized here, in the Cathedral Saint-Maurice, at Angers, just a few miles from Rene Gupil's home.
Imagine an event that took place in the life of Gupil. in Angers, which was maybe 30 miles from where he lived. They brought an Indian from the other continent, and probably the people thought that the Indian had worshipped the devil. And so they baptized him there. They must have looked at the Indian like he was from Mars, from another world altogether. Gupil was most likely there, and if he wasn't, he certainly heard of it.
But the baptism of the Native American was surpassed by an event that same year, just 20 miles to the east of Rene Gupil's home. There may be no better place to search for the inspiration that sent Rene Gupil and his Jesuit companions to New France than here, the Royal College of La Flèche. Built in the 16th century, it was given to the Jesuit order in 1604 and soon became one of the most famous schools of Europe, graduating, among others, the philosopher Rene Descartes.
And it's quite possible that Gupil not only was there, but he might have been attending school at La Flèche, because the man that became his companion, Isaac Jogues, a year older than Rene Gupil, had gone through La Flèche, and other future missionaries too, Massey, Lallemant. They were all influenced by that missionary spirit that came out of La Flèche, an intense fervor to convert the New World.
The school's patron was no less than King Henry IV, and so dedicated was he to the college that he directed that his own heart should be transferred here after his death. Spirited away and hidden for protection during the French Revolution, it was later encased in a heart-shaped gilded container and restored to its place in the north wing of the chapel's transept. Jean-Claude Menard, the information officer at what is today a military school, tells of a significant event which occurred not long after the college's founding. An event of profound significance for Jesuits everywhere, and especially here at La Flèche. In 1622, the college hosted elaborate celebrations of the canonization of Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier. The festivities lasted an entire week. We can only imagine the effect they might have had on young Rene Gupil. Perhaps they aroused in him an ardent missionary zeal for New France.
And he, I'm sure, was influenced by that spirit. Perhaps he even met some of the people that he later lived with.
By the time he was 31, Rene Gupil had become a trained surgeon.
Contrat d'apprentissage de l'art de chirurgien.
This contract, turned up by Jean Gabillard at the archives, is the type of agreement Rene Gupil might have entered into. At a nearby bookstore in the ancient city, a German text from Gupil's era with a frightening array of medical instruments in use at the time. But where did he learn his new métier? This hospital in the heart of Angers was built at the time of the Crusades by the monastic order of the Knights Hospitallers of Saint Jean of Jerusalem.
The hospital, St. John of Jerusalem, took in the poor and the sick, even if they didn't have the money. What they wanted, of course, was food and water and a place to stay.
Il y a une spiritualité de l'accueil des malades. Nos frères les malades.
Spirituality was involved from the moment the sick were received, our brothers the sick.
Pour le soigner, c'était commencer.
Taking in the sick for treatment always began by trying to get them to convert.
Ça nous choque un petit peu que le traitement.
Today, it shocks us a bit that medical treatment began with a confession. But for them it was all part of the same thing. The body and the soul were one.
Le corps et l'esprit, c'est tout un.
If, once fed and rested, their charges wandered off,